my mission, I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road, let's camera action, I'm ready to go.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning, everybody. Steve Winter is here. Steve, you prefer Steve or Steven?
Yeah, either one's
You've been
good.
called a lot of things. We probably can't list all the things that you've been called here in the air. We want to be respectful of the Federal Communications Commission and WNHH and Harry and Paul Bass. But Steve Winter is here. Steve's the alderperson from what ward again?
The 21st Ward.
The 21st Ward, which is really a very unique ward as well here in New Haven. So kind of check out the map, look at the 21st Ward, and kind of see where the what the topography is. You go up hills, you go down hills. Also, kind of look at the income levels, look at the architecture. Kind of drive through the 21st Ward. Now, I say that as a compliment to Steve, who's the older person, and I haven't had a chance. He's seen me in town, and I've seen him in town, but I haven't had a chance to publicly kind of salute him for really making a historic mark here in New Haven in terms of representing that what ward again?
The 21st Ward, like you said, straddles Prospect Hill. So there's a little bit of East Rock, then it goes over the hill, down into Newhallville, and then down over to Dixwell, almost all the way over to Whaley.
Indeed. So imagine when people talk about what represents America, what represents the East Coast, what represents the world. In some ways, the 21st Ward really does represent the global world as we talk about health and inequities and wealth and disparate treatment, but also when we talk about academic achievement and talk about residential values and real estate values. So he has a very complex ward. And again, we have some people might say we have too many wards in New Haven, but that's a discussion that we'll have next time. But nonetheless, the 21st Ward is very unique, and Steve is represent as a unique guy. And I think a unique guy comes to a unique represents a unique ward. We're and the reason I'm talking about wards, et cetera, it's kind of an indirect way of talking about that we're going to share. For the next 44 minutes or so, we're going to talk about democracy. We're going to talk about voting. We're going to talk about policy. We're going to talk about political science, and in a specific way in terms of this word called ranked choice. You may not have heard it. You may have heard it kind of tangentially. You may have seen it. You may be listening in a particular town or municipality where ranked choice for voting is kind of taking place. But it's an emerging policy. It's an emerging process. It's an emerging procedure in terms of how do we really express and believe and kind of manifest what does true democracy mean as we move forward. We've heard things about voting suppression and voting inequities and people not being able to vote for a variety of reasons and being removed from the list. And so we know, and we also know we're certainly in this era of what I call 145th. Yes, I have a bias in terms of who currently occupies the White House, but we're in this 145th era. And this ranked choice, in my mind, is a way to kind of give us perhaps a glimmer of hope, Steve. And we need not only glimmers of hope, but really to be bombarded with thresholds and light bolts and tsunamis of hope. So we may not be able to bring all your salvation to you this morning, but this morning we're going to talk about a little bit of what might be a political salvation, not only today, but perhaps not in 10 years from now, but it might be in the future in terms of political democracy and basically ranked choice. So Steve, tell us, what is ranked choice voting?
Well, that's right. So many people look at politics today and despair because it's so divisive, and it seems like there's no way to bring people together or to bring new ideas in. Things seem stuck. And ranked choice voting is a form of voting that allows you to cast a vote and rank candidates in your order of preference. So instead of just picking one candidate, you can pick multiple candidates. A good example would have been if you were a really eco-conscious voter in the 2016 election and you really wanted to vote for Jill Stein, but you didn't want to throw away your vote, and you were worried she might spoil the election. So you could have put a Clinton as your second choice candidate. And so it's a way to bring a broader diversity of voices into the system, both within our two dominant parties and from outside independent candidates. And the way it works is it creates what's called an instant runoff. So in that example, if you have 3 candidates, the candidate who gets I should step back. The other fundamental thing here when we talk about democracy and what it means to live in a democracy, fundamentally that means majority rule. That when a majority of people want something, unless it infringes on the fundamental rights of another group, that's what we're going to go ahead. That's how we're going to make a decision. What's best for the most. And I think a lot of folks look at politics today and don't feel represented, even if they are part of a majority. And ranked choice, in order to win a ranked choice election, you need a majority. So in this last presidential election, we had 2 candidates of the major parties, neither of whom got a majority.
That's right. None of them received more than 50%.
Yep. And we saw the same thing here in Connecticut with Lamont and Stefanowski and Griebel. Nobody got over 50%. So in a ranked choice election, you've got to get 50% to win. So how does that work? Well, if we take the 2016 example, someone cast their vote for Stein, but since Stein came in last, she gets removed from the tabulation. And everybody who voted for her, we look at their ballots, and who did they put as their second choice votes? And those get added on to the first choice votes from the first round of voting. And we just saw this happen in Maine, where they are making use of ranked choice voting for local offices and also for their representatives in Congress. So similar thing happened in Maine. We had a candidate with about 45% of the vote, another with about 45% of the vote. They looked at the 2 independent candidates who are running and removed them from the race. And when they added those second choice votes, the Democratic candidate got just over 50%. His name's Jared Golden. He's now sitting in U.S. Congress as one of the congressmen from Maine.
Tremendous. Again, you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and it might be somewhat confusing in terms of this ranked choice voting. We've been doing the show, we're now into our 4th year, and I really like the fact that sometimes we'll share things that intentionally you just haven't heard much about, or you don't know exactly what it means, and give you a chance to kind of dig in deeper. And Steve, here in Connecticut, if people want to get involved or to find out more, or to call someone, or to go on the Facebook or website, how can they be? Because you guys are already organizing yourself. You guys and ladies are already organizing yourself in terms of ranked choice voting. How can a person find out more?
So if you're on Facebook, you can type in Voter Choice CT, Voter Choice Massachusetts. We're kind of riffing off their name.
Good.
There's a really strong movement there to get ranked choice voting like Maine has. It's kind of rippling down the coast of New England. They've got over 25,000 members who are pushing really hard to get the legislature in Massachusetts to pass ranked choice voting legislation there. We had our first organizing meeting in December here in New Haven, and we had about 75 people come out because there's, like I said, there's such a thirst for anything that can improve our politics and improve our democracy. And this is one systemic thing that we can do to do that. I think.
So am I invited to the next meeting?
Of course.
Okay. So, do you have an idea when it's going to be, or?
So even if you're not on Facebook, let's say you wanted to show up in person.
Amen.
So it's going to be Tuesday, February 19th at 6 p.m. at the Ives Public Library right next to the New Haven Green.
Okay, that's the downtown library. Some of you Ives might confuse you with what does that mean? But
yep.
And are the meetings held every 2 months? What do you think? What's the strategy?
These are monthly meetings on the 3rd Tuesday of each month at 6 p.m. And for the foreseeable future, they'll be at the main public library in downtown New Haven.
And you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and if you've just tuned in, and Steve Winter is with us, and we're talking about ranked choice voting. And Steve, why is this important, or even relatively should attract people's attention? I mean, people are fatigued, burned out, dissatisfied, depressed, despondent, just kind of pissed with the political system as it is, and this seems to, for some, might be too complicated. Why the heaven are we doing this kind of thing?
Well, I think the big thing is, like I said, in a democracy, we want majority rule, and we want to make sure that the candidate with the most votes and a majority of votes wins. And so, to put things in perspective for folks, a lot of folks are familiar with a runoff race, where if no candidate gets a majority, we take the last two and have a runoff between them. That's essentially what ranked choice voting is doing. By allowing folks to cast their votes for not one candidate, but multiple candidates, we can simulate a runoff between the top candidates and do that, removing one candidate at a time until one candidate has a majority of votes. Why it's so important is it allows voters to cast their vote for someone rather than picking the lesser of two evils and casting a vote against a certain candidate. They can vote for the candidate that they really want. So you can say, all right, I'm going to cast my vote for Tom. He's awesome.
True that.
He may or may not win. If he doesn't win, then I want my vote to stay in play and go to my second choice candidate until one candidate has a majority of votes.
Good point. You referenced Maine, Steve, and I want folks often ask me who my audience is or who listens in, and we've been so blessed, and certainly this stands for the total station of WNHH, that people listen literally worldwide. So whether or not you live in New Haven or you're listening from Connecticut, and you mentioned Maine, there are other states that are participating or that are adopting this initiative.
Yeah, so the fascinating thing about ranked choice voting is that even though it's a relatively new idea for most people, it's not really a new idea at all. It's been around since the 1870s.
Okay.
And we see some U.S. cities like Minneapolis and St. Paul, San Francisco that have adopted this in the last 20 years. We see other U.S. cities like Memphis that have been doing it for 100 years. They've been electing representatives in Australia using this system for 101 years.
Tremendous.
Now.
Yeah, international. Excellent.
And in Ireland as well for the lower house of parliament there. And now we have Maine, the first U.S. state to do it. They passed, I believe, in 2016, and then used it they've been using it in some local elections, like in Portland, Maine. And then, like I said, they used it to elect representative to Congress. And the system did come into play because neither candidate won a majority of votes.
Excellent. As you know, we have you referenced the gubernatorial race, and we have the new governor, Governor Ned Lamont. Are you aware, Steve? You may not know, but perhaps are there any bills pending in this particular legislative session?
There are, Tom. There are two bills. One would look at the implications of doing ranked choice voting here in Connecticut. So the Secretary of State, Denise Merrill, has filed a bill to study how you'd roll out ranked choice voting.
So the Secretary of State, I mean, the constitutional officer, that's kind of unusual. Normally, your state rep or your state senator. I'm really not aware of a constitutional officer submitting a bill. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so she's got a really big push this year around the early voting amendment to allow for various forms of early voting in Connecticut. Could be voting in the week before the election at City Hall. It could be allowing for mail-in ballots. So she has a couple legislative priorities each session. And she said she's interested in ranked choice voting and wants to understand what would ranked choice voting look like here in Connecticut.
Good. I like so if the bill passes, it's kind of an exploratory study of the feasibility.
Exactly. And I think that would be really good because, like you said, this is a new idea not just for the public, but for the legislators, and to give them some time to familiarize themselves with the concept. Some of them are hearing about it, though.
Yes.
On both sides of the aisle. So the other bill that's been filed is a bill that was filed by Arthur O'Neill, who's the longest-serving House member on the Republican side. And he filed a bill for ranked choice voting in party primaries. And so, when I look at the Republican Party this last election, I see something very similar in some ways to what happened nationally in 2016. So Bob Stefanowski doesn't even go to the Republican Party convention.
That's
yet
right.
He ends up winning the Republican primary with about 30% of the vote. That means that for 7 out of 10 Republicans, he wasn't their first choice.
Yes.
And because we didn't have a system like ranked choice voting in place, we couldn't look at second choice votes for all the people who voted for first choice for all the other candidates and figure out, is there another candidate that might represent a better consensus, that might unify the Republican Party? Is there another candidate? Maybe that candidate was Stefanowski, maybe it wasn't. We won't know because we didn't have this system in place. And so ranked choice voting, people sometimes think about it, oh, well, it'll help third parties. I think it would bring a broader diversity of voices in, both within and outside the two major parties. But it's really great in that it helps our parties and whatever district we're in come to a consensus about who's going to be most representative for that particular party or that particular district.
Boy, that's a really good point. As you referenced, the Republican nominee received the nomination for governor was Mark. What's Mark's last name out of Danbury? His last name escapes me at the moment.
Boughton.
Mark Boughton received the Republican Party nomination for governor at the convention, and then, as you say, Stefanowski kind of comes in, and then the gentleman from Trumbull, who was a former first selectman. He was my favorite, quite frankly. Not that I was going to vote for him, but I was predicting him in terms of
winning.
Yeah, winning. Interesting.
I think that whole story brings another angle on this, which is really important for me and for a lot of folks, which is the influence of money on our politics. That you can be a millionaire in Connecticut and, like you said, more or less bypass the party structure, go straight to the primary, win less than a third of the vote, and then be on the ballot for the November election.
Yes.
And so I think that ranked choice voting, in helping these parties and helping us build consensus, can also dilute the influence of money in politics by allowing people, like I said, to vote for their first choice for the person that they really want to vote for, and not feel like they have to settle for the lesser of the evils.
Right. Yeah, not feeling that their vote is wasted. Again, you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and Steve Winter is here, and we're talking about something called ranked choice voting. It might be a new term. You might have heard the term. You may have heard the term and dismissed it, and you may think it's frivolous. But I was glad when Steve reached out to me and asked me if I knew of any groups or individuals that might be interested in this. I'll call it a movement, Steve. I immediately responded. The best way we can do this is let's radio chat, get the word out, share it with people, because although I asked you to come on during this month is considered Black History Month. I say considered because it is Black History Month, but Black History is 24/7, 365. And some folks say, Steve, that Black History Black History Month starts on January 1st and ends on December 31st. I kind of like that phrase it's kind of going about. But I wanted to kind of chat with you during this annual Black History Month, because we know in terms of voting and democracy, and some people have been killed for voting, maybe more than we will ever know. Just the issue of voting, and particularly during Black History Month, is so important. And whether we believe that it is or it isn't, or whether the political system is tarnished and designed to frustrate any even minimal ambitions we might have. Nonetheless, I wanted to kind of have you here and talk to you in February during Black History Month, and just to kind of lift up voting in general, but also just new things. We got to be creative. This is a new age, a new day to be creative and to be innovative, and to think about how our policies and procedures, whether they really serve us or benefit us or not. So I was really glad that you're able to make yourself available for this Monday. Ranked choice voting, what is it for someone that's just tuned in?
So ranked choice voting is a way of voting that allows you to vote for multiple candidates rather than voting for just one candidate, voting for multiple candidates in the order you prefer. And your vote stays in play. Even if your first choice doesn't win, your vote stays in play until one candidate gets a majority of votes. And the way it works is there's an instant runoff. So if no candidate has a majority, the candidate with the least votes gets removed, and they look at all those voters' second choices and add those to the first choices of the leading candidates until one candidate gets a majority.
And if folks want more upfront and in-person information, where should they drive themselves, bicycle themselves, walk themselves in the next few weeks?
So we're going to have our next organizing meeting in a little over 2 weeks on February 19th at the Downtown Public Library in New Haven at 6 p.m. So that's one way to get involved, show up in person. You can find us on Facebook at Voter Choice CT, and then you can just shoot an email to RCV, like Ranked Choice Voting Connecticut, at gmail.com if you're interested in getting involved.
Perfect. Let's just I want to kind of step back for a second, Steve, because you'll be up for election. For re-election, I'm assuming you're going to. Are you going to make your announcement? Want to make your announcement today that you're running?
I am planning to run again.
Are you planning to run again? And so you'll have a chance to vote for you this coming November. Whether you have any opposition or not, that remains to be seen. But why politics for you? You graduated from Yale a few years ago, undergrad, and you've been involved in town, and you're involved with urban issues and ecology and kind of saving the planet and saving the whales and saving the people. but why politics for you?
I'd say public service. I really believe in the phrase public servant, and that we need more folks with a civic mindset to get involved in public life and improve our communities. And I'd seen firsthand how local government can make a huge impact in people's quality of life, where they can live, what their quality of housing is like, how safe they feel in their communities, what their local education is like, how they interact with the police. So that was a big impetus for me in running, was having been in Colorado for a few years and returning to New Haven, coming back and seeing, wow, we still need to pass the Civilian Review Board. There's still lots of work to be done here to improve the deteriorating quality of our housing stock. There's a lot more that we can do to get folks engaged politically and feeling ownership of their communities. And I just thought, you know what? Why not run? See what happens. And got out and started knocking on doors, and was fortunate enough to get elected. And I think, like, tying this into ranked choice voting, we see similar dynamics here in New Haven, where Justin Elliker's announced he's running, Mayor Harp has announced she's going to run again, and then there are some other candidates who I've heard folks are telling them, please don't run. We don't want you to split the vote up. We don't want a messy primary here. With ranked choice voting, candidates can run without feeling like they're going to be the spoiler candidate.
That's right.
They're going to throw the election to someone that they really abhor. So it encourages folks to get involved, get those ideas out there on the table, which is so important, even if you don't win, to socialize new ideas that can help improve our city. And we want to make sure that that's a robust conversation and that people aren't being pushed out or shut out, no matter what their political views are, because there's worries that, oh, you're going to split the vote, or you're going to throw the vote this way or throw the vote that way.
Good. This is helpful. Again, you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and Steve Winter is here with us. And during this Black History Month, but again, as I say, Black History Month starts on January 1st and ends on December 31st, and even for your New Year's Day celebration. And by the way, Steve, are you a big football fan, or are you happy because of yesterday, or couldn't care less, or?
Well, I grew up in Rhode Island, so it's like almost ingrained in my bones to be a Patriots fan. But there's so much wrong with professional football these days that I really try my hardest to stay away. And I got to the end of the season. I got to the fourth quarter of the game before the Super Bowl, and I had to tune in, even though there's all these horrific brain injuries and head trauma, and even though this is a league that continues to shut out Colin Kaepernick, I couldn't. I had
addiction. Addiction comes in. You caved in. You caved in, Steve.
I'm human.
You caved in. And I think we're talking about this, and I appreciate your sharing that and being so transparent with your analysis. We're talking about addictions too. Sometimes we're addicted to the old ways, and how do we kind of revise and think about doing things better and improving? And again, the human species, there's a feeling that you hear the phrase democracy being an ongoing experiment. Some people feel that the experiment has actually failed. Others feel that no, it's truly an experiment, and you kind of continue to innovate and research and improve. So when you mention your commitment to becoming a public servant, I really appreciate that definition, because perhaps, as Douglas would say, the struggle continues. So
it does, and like you said, I believe the experiment's far from over, and that here in Connecticut there are a myriad of ways that we can improve our democracy. I think early voting for me is a huge part of that. I know people in my ward who said, I cannot make it to the polls today. Our state doesn't even give you an hour of paid time off to go to the polls, whereas others do. We need that early voting for folks like that who want to make it out and can't. It's things like that can improve voter participation and really make sure that we're electing people who are representative of our communities. And ranked choice voting is another way of doing that. in cities that have ranked choice voting, like Minneapolis, we can see increases in participation because people feel like they have a candidate or an idea to believe in and to go out and vote for, and they don't feel like they're throwing their ballot away.
Because that belief in your in getting at least the psychic return on your investment is so key when one votes. When you mentioned Minneapolis and we were chatting outside before we came on air, that even if a person is new to America, this ranked choice thing might be a little confusing, and you say to that.
No way. I think that's one common criticism is like, how could we do this? It's so complicated. It'll never work. We'll never get folks to figure it out. And even if we do have folks figuring it out, they're just going to want to vote for one candidate anyway. That's just what they're used to. Like Steve and having to tune into football, they're programmed, and that's not going to change. And the great thing about this is we've got data on this from cities that have tried it out. And so Minneapolis, where we have a large refugee and immigrant community, 95% of folks surveyed say the ballot is easy and clear to understand. Folks are used to ranking things in the order they prefer. We have favorites in all kinds of things.
That's right.
We can all name our favorite candy or where we go to get our favorite sandwich. It's not an unfamiliar concept. And to the point about, well, even if we can figure out the ballot, and it turns out that 95% of people can, are people really going to use it? Are they going to make use of it? Or are they just going to vote for that number one person and move on to the next line on their ballot? And in Maine, we've got information from this last election, and 7 out of 8 people ranked more than one person on their ballot. So folks really are making use of this. They want to get their voice out there. They want to have more of a voice, and they want to have more of a choice. And we're seeing them exercising that, which to me isn't surprising because I think we're all familiar with this feeling of, well, I really do like what so-and-so's saying, but I just can't vote for them because I don't want to spoil this election. I came of age in the Ralph Nader, Al Gore, Bush debacle, and I think that still hangs over our politics today, and it's been a kind of like one bookend of the electoral dysfunction that we've seen in the 21st century. And I think we need to put the bookend on the other end and move on to the next chapter. And I think things like ranked choice voting can help us do that in a systemic way, and in a way that not only improves our participation and the representative character of our democracy, but also can help improve our politics. And that's really important. Anything we can do to lower the volume a little bit, change the tone of our public discourse, I'm open to any ideas of things that can improve that. And ranked choice voting, we've seen that candidates are more likely to soften their tone and less likely to go negative because they know that they're not just competing for that first choice vote.
Good point. That's a very good point. Yeah, it could impact the campaign style. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the messaging and the advertising. That's a really, really good point.
And that, I think, can flow over into our politics. I'm hopeful that if you have a less combative campaign, you can have a more collaborative politics.
And you referenced, I was anxious to kind of, anxious, but it was a blessing to kind of be able to chat with you because you referenced Maine, but also I believe you said San Francisco?
That's right. Yeah. So here in New Haven, we're actually lucky to have one of the guys who helped organize the effort there to get ranked choice voting passed for the city council, the board of supervisors. Caleb Klepner, who's a really big voting advocate, helped run New Haven Votes for many years. He actually transplanted here to New Haven.
Tremendous.
So we have a real personal connection to San Francisco, which was part of the rebirth of ranked choice voting. We had ranked choice voting. It bubbled up during the progressive era in the late 1800s and then in the 20s in the United States, and was instituted in places like Memphis, where folks said like, hey, this makes a lot more sense. We still have it, has carried over in Memphis and also in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Cambridge as well.
Where they're using ranked choice voting for the city council. But instead of just, they're not they're not just choosing multiple candidates, they're also seating multiple candidates. So that's a multi-member ranked choice vote where you're saying, okay, I'm going to vote for, these are my top 5, and I want to see them get in, and then that gets tabulated with everyone else's votes, and they do a ranked election. But instead of seating one person on the council, they're seating multiple.
Boy, okay, so you could really kind of organize a slate.
Yeah, and so that proportional representation is something that I think a lot of folks are really hungry for, because it can allow minority communities to still get a seat on that council and not be shut out by redistricting or shut out by politics as usual in a city. They can still get one of those 5 or one of those 7 seats due to the rankings. And so I think that's a fascinating idea. Some of the national advocacy groups like Fair Vote, their dream would be to have proportional representation in Congress, where instead of having these gerrymandered districts, you can have states that are doing a ranked vote for their Congress people and then sending them in a way that's much more representative of the different communities within a state, sending them to Washington.
Now, if Steve has lost you in the last 2 minutes that 2 minutes of what he just said, it's deliberately and intentional, because again, education policy. You're going to hear this term proportional representation. As you know, Steve, on Facebook, when we were kind of talking about coming on the air today, someone asked about, well, I really would like to see proportional representation. And so much is linked. We know that women couldn't vote until 1919. We know that blacks are still, and others are still having challenges on voting. So this voting thing, if you look at it, you can look at American history in terms of what does, from purely a voting and representation standpoint. If I said the 3/5 clause, you may or may not know what that means, but kind of look up the 3/5 clause. In a way, that was kind of ranked voting in a way, ranked voting for people that weren't considered people, but were considered property, and so valuable enough that it impacted representation. So proportional representation, ranked choice voting, this is what we're talking about today. Policy, politics, even your personal livelihood, as Steve kind of articulated early on. What comes to your mind as you sit here kind of immersed in the Tom Ficklin world?
Well, I think you're right that the jump all the way to proportional representation may lose some people. And to me, that speaks for the need to socialize this new idea about, hey, you don't have to just choose one candidate. Tell us who you really want to vote for, and then tell us who you'd be happy to vote for, you'd settle for voting for. And I think that getting that out there, that, hey, this is an idea that's been around for 150 years. This has been in use in Ireland. This has been in use in Australia for decades. It's been in use in American cities for 100 years in some places, and in other places, it's just been bubbling up in the last 20 years as we have this movement, this desire for a more representative democracy in places like Minneapolis, in places like San Francisco, in states like Maine, and that same desire is coming here to Connecticut. And I think, I think like you said, democracy is an experiment, and things don't always go well. And when we look back at some of the compromises that were made constitutionally, they have their roots here in Connecticut. The 3/5 clause was drafted by Roger Sherman, our most famous New Haven founding father. And so, we can see how the twisted math of these compromises plays out. But now that we're looking back on that, we can set up something, still strive towards that more perfect union and have a more representative democracy by changing the way we simply cast our ballot.
Indeed. You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and Steve Winters with us. Steve, when people come to your meeting, is when again?
It's going to be Tuesday, February 19th at 6 p.m. at the main branch of the New Haven Public Library, the Ives branch downtown.
And roughly an hour, 2 hours?
Yeah, it'll be about 2 hours, and we're going to be hosting some experts, some seasoned pros from Massachusetts who are going to do a pitch workshop. So it's going to be kind of the ABCs of RCV, of ranked choice voting. How can you explain ranked choice voting to anyone? And that way, anyone who comes to that meeting can leave feeling like, I know how to talk to my family members about this. I know how to go to my local town committee meeting and talk about it. I know how to go out to an event and sign someone up
So further that thought. So you're looking to baptize folks in February. They leave there charged up, and is it to support an amendment, support an automatic resolution, to support Denise Merrill? What do you, in addition to kind of, so you're in the education phase, but what happens after how do we get to the policy implementation phase?
Yeah, great question. So just like they did in Maine, just like they're doing in Massachusetts, we need to build a movement here around improving the way we vote. And Voter Choice Connecticut can play a role in that by pushing for ranked choice voting. So the first thing is to get people not only thinking about this and understanding what it is, but going out and talking to their state reps about it, talking to their local groups about it, explaining, hey, you're feeling shut out or you're feeling underrepresented. This is a systemic way that we can change that and make our politics more representative and inclusive. And I think that's a powerful message that can get a lot of folks interested. So yesterday I was at the Run for Refugees and had just a tiny little table with some sign-up sheets. Some people saw it and said, oh, I've heard about this. I've heard about what's going on in Maine. How can we be a part of this? What does it look like? And, oftentimes you have people who say, like, sure, I'll sign your petition, but that's all I want to do.
Yeah.
That's not going to get this done. In order to get the legislature to act on one of those two bills, the study bill or the bill to allow for this in party primaries, where I think it can make an immediate impact on our politics, we need to push our legislators, make them prioritize it. And to do that, we've got to prioritize it and make space in our busy lives for conversations about why the way we vote matters and how changing the way we vote can change our politics.
Well said. And again, when you reference the time commands and the time that really just bites into our schedule, bites into our lives and the competing priorities. What's your sense of you graduate undergrad in 2011, and then when did you come back?
I came back like 2015, 2016.
What's your sense? And you're how old are you? 28? How old are you?
I'm 30.
You're 30.
Yeah.
So what is your sense of do you guys have a name? Your generation, by the way. I mean, these names kind of come back and forth.
Yeah, I would say I would identify as a millennial.
As a millennial.
Yeah.
What's your sense? And you said where'd you go to high school? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Rhode Island. Went to high school in Providence.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were in Colorado for a little bit. So you've had a little sense of what's going on. What are the New Haven millennials up to? Are they kind of invigorated? Is it just a dispersed group? What's your sense of what's cooking in terms of how they perceive the world and their life in the future?
Yeah, I think millennials feel at home in the city and want a city where they feel like they can walk and bike and hang out and go to a show, meet up with their friends. I think that idea of having a connected urban lifestyle is something that's really appealing. And I think that there is some real energy around improving New Haven and making it feel more hospitable just on the ground level for people who are more interested in alternative forms of transportation, who are interested in improving housing. And so I think that those are really exciting things. Some of the millennials I know are involved with the Could Be Fund here in New Haven. So they are looking, how do we connect the different neighborhoods in New Haven through improving our public spaces, through improving art. And so I think this idea of connectivity, of different communities, of different neighborhoods, of living in a city and being able to access all the many different nooks and crannies and corners and cultures is something that really appeals to young folks. And so having that kind of access doesn't mean moving out to a suburb. It means trying to improve the urban areas that we have and building on the great bones that places like New Haven has.
Are we competitive for the millennial talent? And say, are we competitive against Manhattan or against Boston or against Cambridge? Or do you find that people say, "Oh, I want to kind of come to New Haven," or "I want to flee at the first time I can"?
I think that a lot of folks are still going to choose these huge hubs, but I think that there are some folks who say, you know what, I don't really want that. Maybe they've tried it out and realized it was crazy and stressful and too big and overwhelming, but they still want to live in a city and still want to have access to all the great things that go on. in a place like New Haven.
Great. Again, you're listening to Tom Ficklin Show, and Steve, we have about another five or 7 minutes. I want to give you the last word, and we're talking about what again?
About ranked choice voting.
If you want to find out more about it, you can show up where?
You could show up on Tuesday, February 19th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the main branch of the New Haven Public Library in downtown New Haven.
Or Facebook?
Facebook Voter Choice CT. Or you could shoot an email to RCV, like Ranked Choice Voting, Connecticut @gmail.com.
And there's so many, Steve. Let me ask you kind of a, not a devil's advocate question, but, and you've answered this in part, but just as we're talking here, and as you know, sometimes I wouldn't say that I'm overwhelmed with issues, but I become aware of a variety of things, and I've been, here in town and kind of involved with various ways of marketing and media and public relations, and just keeping my finger on the pulse. And it's easy to get overwhelmed with the competing initiatives and movements and ideas and strategies and who's doing what now and how do you compete. So how does this connect? And you referenced it before, but as we conclude, I want to give you a chance to kind of connect this, that this is not an isolated endeavor, that there is some intersectionality, as they say.
Absolutely. I think this intersects with so many issues, in part because it allows for new voices to come up in our political system, both within the major parties and outside of them. So if folks are feeling shut out and they're feeling like, oh, I would want to run, but what if it were to throw the election to another candidate? How can I get my ideas out there in a meaningful way? This is a way to do that. This is a way for someone to come out, and even if they were to run on just a small platform of ideas, if they get a strong showing from first choice votes, so people are saying, okay, I'm going to give my first choice vote to so-and-so, they're running on simply how do we improve the quality of housing in New Haven.
Yes.
That's going to send a message to the other candidates in the race. And the other candidates in the race, to try to win those second choice votes from those voters, are going to want to work on their message on housing as well. And so I think we can see that with housing. I think we could see that with improving our policing. I think we can see that with a number of issues where folks really feel like they're shut out, that this is a way to improve our politics within the party, both within our parties and in the competition of ideas that takes place outside of Democrat, Republican, and unaffiliated, that this is a way for more of those ideas to bubble up to the surface in our campaigning and in our politics. And so in that way, I really think it intersects with many other issues. And then in terms of the health of our democracy, we are seeing the unraveling of institutions and norms that have kept things together, for better or worse, in this country for so many years. And anything we can do to strengthen our public discourse and build consensus, I think, is really valuable. And anything we can do to bring more people and more ideas into the political process, I think, is really valuable. And this is a system that allows for both of those things.
Tremendous. Just as we conclude, just reiterate again, Steve, if you would, with some of the, give you a chance to kind of talk about your platform and the automatic platform. You mentioned housing and economy and downtown development and community development, but just articulate some of the words that I've been here in New Haven since '71, so I'm kind of indoctrinated to. I guess drank the water down on the green. But what should we be striving for to improve? And you've alluded to some of those categories, but I just want to give you a chance to conclude, because there's always maximum improvement, continued improvement, sustained improvement. That should be the goal. Never to kind of rest on our laurels. So just kind of conclude on what we want to still collectively kind of work toward and together on.
So the Board of Alders unanimously passed a Civilian Review Board ordinance that allows for independent investigatory oversight of civilian complaints filed against any of the police operating in New Haven. And I think we gave it a strong start, in that it has the legal framework it needs to do its job. Now we've got to have folks step up and serve for 2 or 3 year terms on this task force. So we really need folks in New Haven. If you're interested in improving policing, if you're interested in making sure that all folks in public life are held accountable, this is an opportunity for folks who are who are really motivated and have high integrity to get involved in a really substantive way. And so seeing that initiative get off the ground is going to be very important.
And you've referenced, just as we conclude, housing, but you're
Yeah.
also, by implication, you're talking about affordable housing?
Yeah, so the Affordable Housing Task Force released a number of really good recommendations for how the city can improve access to affordable housing and the quality of our existing housing. And I think both of those are very important. And some of them are things that we could do right now. So improving the way that we inspect our housing. So, for example, if you're a rental property owner, you might only get a city checkup every 3 years. Improving that process, or increasing the fines for noncompliance to make sure that some of these mega landlords and property management companies are really paying for it if they're not providing.
Such as the lead paint issue, for example.
Yeah, the lead paint issue, any of these housing related issues. When I get calls from constituents and they're saying that their lights won't work, or they've got mold all over their bathroom and their landlord won't do anything about it, we need to make sure that our city inspectors have the wherewithal to go in and make sure that those landlords react and clean things up. I think that's a big thing. And then I think there are a number of things we can do in the short term related to our zoning and our land use policy, so that we can jumpstart development on empty lots, so that we can allow people to put a mother-in-law unit in their home so that someone can come into one of these accessory dwelling units, or someone to live above a garage or in a carriage house behind a building. Those are ways that we can increase the supply of housing and even the supply of affordable housing. So in Los Angeles, they're pairing these accessory dwelling units with Section 8 and giving the voucher monies to local property owners. This is stuff that we can do right here without waiting for the state to do anything, without waiting for any federal dollars. By looking at those land use and zoning policies.
Tremendous. Steve, you've teased me enough that you're going to have to come back. You have to come back. Harry's giving me the high sign. We're going to kind of sign off, and really appreciate your kind of being here, Steve. Again, in a few weeks, people should show up where?
February 19th, Tuesday, 6 to 8 p.m. at the New Haven Main Branch Public Library downtown by the Green.
And on Facebook?
And on Facebook, we're Voter Choice CT.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Again, thank you everybody for listening. Again, democracy is so important, whether you're despondent, whether you're excited, whether you could care less about what this word democracy means, or to be a republic. These are tenuous times for us. These are really tenuous times, whether you are in touch with the local scene, with the domestic scene, with the national scene, with the international scene. Our future generations depend on us. So let's step up to the plate as in any and every way that you can. Thank you for listening. Talk to you next week.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Cause this is my road. Let's camera action. I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down. I just gotta get up.